Your pastor, Father Duffy, would tell you that at the tribunal we get a lot of very strange phone calls. Some of them are kind of, ordinary sorts of things about holy days and so on. I had one this past week from a woman who I guess had just buried her mother, and she asked me the question, how many rooms are there in heaven? And, of course I knew the reference must have been to St. John chapter 14, starting around verse 2. And I said, well, there's a problem with the word that they translate that you've heard, rooms. I said, it used to be, way back in the day, in my Father's house there were many mansions. And then in the New American Bible it says, in my Father's house there are many dwelling places. And whatever translation she was listening to said rooms. But you notice they keep getting smaller and smaller. Pretty soon it's going to be, in my Father's house there are many broom closets. I think it's a question of perception that is brought to our mind, hearing what we want to hear and looking at things as we want to see them, that's brought out both in our first reading and in our gospel. But we know how this works. If good things happen to us, it's because we work so hard. We deserve it for all the hard things that have come our way and the extra effort we put in. If somebody we don't like gets blessed, that conniving creep, what did they do to get that? So on and so forth. You know how this plays out. It's a question of perception. Exactly the same thing happens. The Lord just says it outright in the book of the prophet Isaiah, my ways are not your ways, nor your ways my ways. And after we get over the shock and outrage of that, like those who didn't get the wage that they thought they should get, we should say, my ways are not your ways my ways. Thank God. Thank God our ways are not his ways. Thank God that mercy, the mercy of God, is not subject to the whims of a moment or the upsets that we've had in any given day. Consider how you talk to members of your family, your children, your spouse, maybe those in a store, depending on what the day is like. Sometimes they get their heads bitten off. Thanks be to God, God's way is not our way. Thanks be to God that the final judgment that will be ours is not contingent on our always having gotten things right. It's not getting things right all the time that's going to get us into heaven. It's the mercy of God. Thank God for that. Thank God, then, that each of us is made in the image of God and not the reverse. We're living in very difficult, ugly times. I am stunned to hear that priests would suggest that because you vote a certain way, you're going to go to hell. Well, Father, why don't you pave the way for us and you go down there first, and when it starts getting comfortable, you let us know. The fact of the matter is that we are all relying on the mercy of God and God's perception of things, God's perception of us, God's perception of what's needed and what things need to be set aside. In the purview of some, the space in heaven may seem to be getting smaller, to the point where there's only going to be one little chair for them, and maybe for the Blessed Mother, and maybe for the Lord himself next to the Father. Thanks be to God. There's room for us all.